Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the start of our new unit on genetics. We're going to ease into this topic a little bit, talking about DNA and the history behind some of the foundations that we will then be using for the rest of the unit. We're going to start off today by talking a little bit about DNA. We're going to focus a lot about DNA in this unit because a lot of our genes, a lot of our attributes come from the expression of genes in our DNA. So DNA, like we talked about during mitosis and meiosis, there's 23 pairs of chromosomes in humans, and in those 23 pairs of chromosomes, we have all of the genetic information that tells our body who we are, what we look like, what color our eyes are, how tall we're going to be. All of that information is stored in the DNA, stored in our chromosomes. Chromosomes is a word we're going to be using a lot, right? Like we said, there are 23 pairs of chromosomes in the human body, right? In each of our cells. Right? And in the chromosomes, right, this picture is of one single chromosome, right, 1X. We have a total of 46 of these. On each chromosome, we have a number of genes blocked off, right, pieces of our DNA coding to specific things like hair color, eye color, height, whether or not your earlobe is attached to your body, whether or not you can roll your tongue, right? Things like that are all attached to genes, which are stored in our chromosomes. Another not so new piece of information here is that genes get passed down from parent to offspring. Yeah, Felipe, this is living environment. Right? Genes are passed down from parent to offspring, just like we saw in mitosis and meiosis, right? In mitosis, it's a perfect copy. We start with an organism with 10 chromosomes and we end with 2 copies with 10 chromosomes each. In meiosis, we make sex cells that each have half the number of cells, half the number of chromosomes. So if I have male and female gametes coming together, right, the sperm and the egg are going to come together to make a complete organism. We're going to have, for humans, 23 chromosomes and 23 chromosomes to make a full 46 chromosome offspring. It'll be about genetics this week, Filippo. Because the exact combination of chromosomes, because the exact combination of genes aren't the same for every sperm and every egg, if you have siblings, this is why you're not exactly identical to your siblings. Right? You share some characteristics because you get some from your mother and some from your father, but it's not an exact science. It's not an exact copy of what your sister has or what your brother has or what your other brother has. Right? Every combination of the 46 is slightly different because you might get one from your father that you didn't get from your mother, or vice versa, from compared to your brother or your sister. And so, now we get to a little bit of history. When we started learning about genetics, right, the person who really introduced us to the idea of genetics and traits being passed down was Gregor Mendel. And Gregor Mendel was a monk, and he was a scientist. and he studied pea plants and did experiments on pea plants and combined pollen and grew new pea plants over and over and over again to discover the idea of the Punnett Square, to discover the idea of a gene. Right? And so when he discovered genes and this whole concept, it was the idea that every cell in the body has 2 genes for every trait. And we're going to see that in our Punnett squares, right? You might be, right, when we see things like this or this or this is showing the 2 genes for your traits. Right? You get 1 from each parent, and the combination that you get determines what traits you're going to show. Right, so for example, right, pause. You said that already, stop that. For example, if you have these 2 traits on your mother and these 2 traits from your father, you're going to get 1 from your father and 1 from your mother. And depending on which combination you get, right, 4 possible combinations, it's going to show you your possible outcomes. Right? Now, a couple of things that we are going to see here. Capital and lowercase letters. A capital letter is a dominant trait. And a lowercase letter is a recessive trait. Dominant traits are stronger, right? They always show in comparison to recessive traits. In this example that we have here, we're talking about eye color, right? Capital B for brown eyes, lowercase g for green eyes. If we look at this combination, the mother has brown eyes, the father has brown eyes, because BG, the capital B is the dominant gene, and it will overshow the green one. Right? So this will be brown eyes. This will be brown eyes. This will be green eyes. And that's really the only combination that can show you green. Right? If you want to show your recessive trait, you need both of your genes to be the recessive ones. Any other combination is going to be brown. Right? So these 2 options are going to give us brown, and this here is going to give us green. Right? So if we're looking at options, right? If we're looking at these 2 people as the parents, the options are brown eyes, brown eyes, brown eyes, green eyes. And we're going to break that down and look at percentages for a lot of these moving forward. We're going to say there's a 75% chance of brown and a 25% chance of green in the babies, in the offspring. Right? And this isn't limited to just eye color. We can talk about this in a number of different ways. For our next one, right? Dominant genes are more powerful than other genes. They are going to overpower, that's the word I used, overpower the recessive gene. So any combination of capital B and anything else is going to show brown eyes. Anything that is double recessive is going to show you your green. We can also have, actually no, hold on, I'm going to hold that thought for a second. Right. So again, if we're going to fill in a Punnett square, you're going to put one parent on the top, one parent on the side, and then you're going to say, well, if I get the capital B from the mother and the capital B from the father, I might get the capital B from the mother, the lowercase g from the father, lowercase g from the mother, capital B from the father, or a lowercase g from both of them. Right. And like I said before, these are all going to be shown as brown eyes, while this is shown as green eyes. Right. It doesn't matter if it's a double capital or a capital and a lowercase. The 25% for brown eyes and the 50% for brown eyes can be added together for 75% chance of brown and a 25% chance of green. Now, where'd it go? There it is. Okay, so. Alright, not yet. We're gonna do a little bit of vocab here. Alright, we've got two words, homozygous. O-U-S, homozygous, and heterozygous. Heterozygous. Right, homozygous is when you have both genes the same. Right, so that means double capital, double lowercase. Heterozygous is two different genes. Right, so if I have BG, BG, is there any other? Yeah, BB. Right, one of each different gene. Right, heterozygous is sometimes referred to as a hybrid. Right, with one of each type of gene. Right, and we can use that down here as well if we wanted to use those vocab words to talk about our odds here. Right, we have a 25% chance for homozygous brown. We have a 50% chance for heterozygous brown. And we have a 25% chance for homozygous green. Right, so homozygous and heterozygous, some words that you'll see a little bit more if you move on to chem and look at chem stuff. Homogeneous and heterogeneous, right? Both the same or heterozygous, two different. if I wanted to make this Punnett Square, where one parent has green eyes, see how they tell you what the genes are going to be, double lowercase g's, and the other has hybrid brown eyes, a big B and a little g. I want to populate my Punnett Square, so I'll put one parent on the top and one parent on the side. I have different fonts. I can play with different fonts. Right, which is going to give us a little g no matter what, versus another parent coming in with that, and we're going to go down, down, this way to fill in our percentages. Right, if we look at the results of our Punnett Square, we have a 50% chance, 50% for heterozygous or hybrid brown eyes, and a 50% chance for homozygous green eyes. And then, perfect. All right, so again, looking at our Punnett Square. Oh, I did it backwards this time. Poop. We still have the same things. I switched them this way. I should have double checked that. But again, we have 50% brown, 50% green. Another option that we can have for Punnett Squares is for co-dominant genes. This is also true of co-recessive genes. It's when you can have two different genes that are both dominant. Right? We're going to look at tall and short here. Right? So if you have T and T, you are not a smiley face. You are tall. If you have S and S, you are short. But this is an example where you can see if you have one of each, right, in the past, right, in our previous examples, it was B and little g, and that just meant brown eyes. But here, where they're both dominant, the T doesn't overpower the S doesn't overpower the T. They kind of fight each other, and you end up with a medium height. Right? Neither tall nor short, somewhere in the middle. Because both of these are dominant. It can also be the example where there's this option with both recessive. Right? If these were all lowercase letters, it would work the same way, because they are co-recessive or co-dominant. Right, so here, one tall parent, one short parent, 100% chance for medium height children. Right, because we have a capital T in all four and a capital S in all four. Right, so let's look at a Punnett Square for co-dominant genes. If we do one, hold please, Let me make sure I don't mess this up again. I don't want to counteract my own work. Okay, good. So we're going to put the tall parent, or sorry, the medium height parent on top here. And fill downward. We're going to put the short parent here and fill in left to right. And now we can take a look at our odds. All right, we've got 2 TS's and we've got 2 SS's, which is going to give us a 50-50. Capital T for tall, capital S for short. Because they're co-dominant, we're going to have 50% for medium. And because both of these are S's, we're going to have a 50% chance for short. All right, so what percentage of offspring are tall? 0%. Nobody's going to be tall. Medium, we just said 50%. And short, 50%. Right, and if we take a look at our typed answer here, right, we can follow the same thought process we followed before. Right, we still have traits from each parent. They still fit in the same spots that we just put them in, and we still get the same percentages we just had. Now, just because Gregor Mendel was doing this a long time ago doesn't mean that we don't still use this today. Right? We still use Punnett squares and other types of trait tracking. Anything that is bread, so if you have not like eating bread, but bread without the A, right? If you have horses and you're breeding horses, if you have dogs and you're breeding dogs, if you have cows and you're breeding cows, right? Any animal or plant that you are breeding, they have their heritage monitored. They have, this was their this was their father, this was the mother, this was the great-grandfather, the great-grandmother, right? Those lines of traits are tracked so that you can have a better idea of what 2 traits or what combination of traits you can expect to get from your offspring. Right, to get from breeding these 2 animals. It's very useful in zoos for endangered animals when they are bred to try to keep them alive. It's important to trace back the family history of each animal to make sure that they're not related, right? So that we don't inbreed the animals, but also so that we maintain healthy animals when we try to breed them. Right. When we're looking at crops, there are numbers of crops that are bred for their resistances to heat, their resistance to cold, natural insect resistance, natural bacteria resistance, things like that, to make crops that don't need to be sprayed for viruses to make crops that can last a little bit longer into the winter or start a little bit earlier in the spring with the growing, for, maximum production of apples or pears or beets or peaches or whatever plant we happen to be growing. Right. Right, so that's it for today. Next time, we're going to look at DNA itself and what information is stored in the DNA. Take a little bit of a closer look on the things we talked about today. Let's take a bit of a closer look on genes and what it means for a gene to be on or off. How does my DNA tell my body that my eyes should be brown instead of blue? Things like that. All right. Keep an eye on Google Classroom for our schedule for next week, and I'll see you then.